I'm Ken Ward, and I'm going to take you through the building. And are you all engineers or science majors or something?
Chemical engineers.
Let's go, girls.
Okay.
Chemical engineering class.
Okay.
Okay, she's back to 13.
Okay.
That makes her big
Well,
difference.
people,
I'm 12.
okay, anyway, the two houses that we have, there's one across the street, and then there's this one. I'll tell you a little about that one, sort of in between talking about this one. This building is about 129,000 days old. And 350. But the building across the street is maybe 140,000 days old. Now, I mention the days because people think of houses as something that lasts 50, 70, 100 years, and this one has lasted more than 3 times that. And if we continue to care for it the way we do, it can last 500 years or 1,000 years. And I'll tell you why as we go around. But I want you to see the building from the outside and look over at the first windows on the lower floor. You'll notice that those bricks are a little bit orange. Those bricks were brought over from England in about late 1600s. Now, why would people put bricks in a ship, carrying it across the sea? Does anyone know what ballast is? You ever seen a nice big sailing ship? It has those big masts, and they put tons and tons of cloth on that to make the ship go. Well, if you don't put ballast in the bottom of the ship will just fall. And you need something very, very heavy. And have you ever heard of block? They put it on curbs, and you see some driveways going with it. Belgian block is also used. It's a piece of granite about yay big, and that was put in the bottom of the ship. And the ships carried that stuff over here. But when they went back to Europe or somewhere else, they were carrying heavy things in the ship. And therefore, they didn't need ballast. So if you're carrying heavy things back to Europe, you don't need ballast. If you're carrying light things over here, you need ballast. Okay, if you look at that, the orange part is actually probably built in the late 1600s. And as you go up, you see that the bricks change, and that means they were built later. You see the section, the 4 windows far away? That's our new addition. That was put up in 1750. So that was a new addition to make the house a little bit larger. And the reason that was put on addition was to lure the royal governor who lived down in Burlington, down near Philadelphia. They wanted to lure him up to Elizabeth, so they would have the home of the royal governor here. And has anyone seen a $1 bill?
Yes.
Anyone seen a $10 bill?
Yes.
Anyone seen a $100 bill?
Yes.
Okay, who's on the $100 bill? Who's on the 10?
Hamilton.
And who's on the 1? Every one of those men worked in this building at one time or another. So this is a building that is contemporaneous with those people. Alexander Hamilton went to school in Elizabeth, and his teacher lived across the street in the Yellow House. And the governor lived here, and Washington was a frequent visitor. You've all heard the story that Washington never told a lie. That's a lie. George Washington, when the Revolution was on, always tried to make sure no one knew exactly where he was. Because if the British could catch him, well, you know what they would have done. So he tried to leave trails that were incorrect. So he put on his letters a place where he wasn't, but he wanted it, if the letter got intercepted, the British would think he was somewhere where he wasn't. So that's why he lied about where he was. So in any case, let's go in the house, and then we'll go room by room, and then we'll go into the basement and go to the... Okay, come on in. Okay, this room is not really real. It's a reproduction of what was here. All the wood is as old as the house should be, but this kitchen did not exist for a number of years, and it was rebuilt. Now, if you look at the fire back, there's an iron piece back there. It's called a fire back, and that's a big piece of iron. And that fire back was original to the kitchen that was once here. Now, this part of the house was built with wood. It was always expected that kitchens would ultimately burn down. So when the kitchen burned down, the brick house back there was safe, the kitchen burned down, and they built a new one. And they used the same sink you can see over there, and they might use the same fire back. Does anybody know why they put fire backs in the back of the fireplace? Well, the fire was always going. Always someone was cooking something, day and night. And the fire back did radiate heat back into the room, so it was good for cooking, but it had another very interesting use. When fireplaces were built, they were built of stone, and sometimes a little bit of water would get inside the stone, and as the fire got hotter and hotter and hotter, the water inside the stone would expand, and what would happen? It would blow up like a cannonball. So a safety reason for having a fire back is to see that if the stones blow up, you don't get hurt. So a fire back does not blow up. It's very handy to have it, pushing the heat back into the fireplace for cooking. You'll notice that there's a bottle on one of the andirons over there. That would have been a bottle of Madeira, wine, or an alcohol of some kind, because the people in colonial America were very heavy drinkers. Very, very heavy drinkers. They didn't drive cars, so they didn't get DUIs, but some of them fell off their horses. In any case, the reason they drank so much was because they needed energy, and alcohol is a form of energy, and we'll discuss that a little bit more later on. Now, on top of the mantelpiece there, you see the first piece of ceramic there. It has a little cover on it. It's a nice little woven cover. You know what that is? That's the bathroom. It's a chamber pot. And the reason they put that little doily thing on the top was when you woke up in the middle of the night, you didn't disturb the other people in the room, and you climbed the top back on, and then you went back to sleep. But there were no bathrooms. And so this house never really had plumbing, because either people used the chamber pot or they went outside to an outhouse. But houses like this, and that's one reason a house like this lasts so long, because it really doesn't have any water pipes to leak. It doesn't have all of the problems that heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems cause to house. So this house, if we don't have heating and air conditioning and water, we don't heat this. We just stop using the house in the winter when it gets too cold. So anyway, that's the chamber pot there. The people that lived in this house over the years comprised quite a number of occupations. It was a tenement house at one time. 2 governors lived here. Governor Ogden and Governor Belcher, of course, lived in this house too. So that's from 1750 to 1757. This house was effectively the capital of New Jersey. So where the governor lives, that's where the seat of government is. And the next room in there was where the New Jersey legislature met. So this house was once the capital of New Jersey, only for 7 years, but that's what it was. Any questions?
Why did they move it?
Excuse me?
Why did they move the governor from here? Like, why was it only 7 years?
Governor Belcher stayed here, but the later governors, one was the son of William Franklin. He was the illegitimate son of Benjamin Franklin. And he essentially was not loyal to the United States. He was loyal to Britain. And quite honestly, he was too chicken to stay here. He wanted to be in Perth Amboy, and he wanted a big British frigate real close to him so he could escape, which he ultimately did. Benjamin Franklin disinherited him, by the way.
You think? You think? I mean, he was like as American as they come, wasn't he?
Ben Franklin was,
Yeah.
but his son was loyal to the crown, and Ben Franklin had gotten him the job as royal governor, but he did not stay loyal to the country, and he went back to England and Benjamin Franklin. They had some words together later on during peace negotiation times, but they never did. He was never forgiven for being disloyal. That was. So in any case, let's go on to the next room and take a peek there. You see that right there? This one right there? Just remember that. Okay, this room was used sometimes as a dining room, and also a place for the New Jersey legislature to meet. Now the fireplace there, that is probably about 1800, so it's not a 1750, it's sort of like a newer fireplace. It's still a very valuable piece, and very many very fine homes in this country have fireplaces like that. You'll see pictures over the mantelpiece, and you see the one on the right. That's our right. That's the house being looted by British soldiers. And there was a party held here, and the British weren't invited, and they were very ticked off, because they were really after catching George Washington, who was here. And Alexander Hamilton was here, and a lot of other people were here. And the British wanted to catch them all, but they got a little late to the party. And what they did is they took all of the stuff in the house, they took it out right over there, and they burned all of the contents of the house. So that is why there really are no pieces of original furniture from that period in this house, because the British destroyed it. We have a picture over here. And now, the picture doesn't really represent a real place. It's sort of an imaginary place. But the people largely in this picture were people who would have been, or many of them would have been at the party. So this kind of a house did not exist in North America. But it's sort of a fake painting. And of course, they probably made the women's dresses look a little nicer than they were, because during wartime in America, in the Revolution, people couldn't even get material of that quality to make dresses out of. So now we have an interesting exhibit over here. It's got lights on the bottom and lights on the top. If you have the lights on the bottom, you can see this is the streets as they are today that you see this way. And this is how it looked in the 1700s. So it's an interesting use of a map to show people, like if they had their house on such and such a street, this way. If they had their house on one of these streets here, they could figure out what was there 300 years or 250 years back. Let's move on to the next room. Yes, that's one I can do.
Is it real?
Well, it's a decorative type thing. It's not. It is real, but it's not. It's not edible at this point. This room is where there's a picture of Governor Belcher with a big wig on. He's the one on the left. And the fellow on the far right is Governor Ogden of New Jersey. He lived in this house. And then the fellow in the center is actually the mayor of Elizabeth, and he was also a founder of Princeton University. Now, Princeton University started in Elizabeth, and then it moved to Newark, and then it went down to Princeton. But in the early days, it was started here in Elizabeth, and it was Governor Belcher who signed the papers that started the university. Now, fellow in the center is William Peartree Smith. He was a mayor of Elizabeth, and he was also he was supposedly the son of a fellow named Port Royal Smith. And Port Royal Smith, according to Elizabeth history, which is totally wrong, Port Royal Smith was supposedly the royal governor of Jamaica. Well, the reality was he did live in Jamaica, but he was not the royal governor. He was a pirate. And he was in the pirate business, and he did very well. So the young William Peartree Smith was a very rich man, very, very rich. And it was all based on an occupation of piracy. Now, what happens if you want to go into the pirate business? Now, I'm not recommending that, but what would you do if you wanted to go into the pirate business? Well, you'd come to the front door here, you'd knock on the door, and you'd ask if the governor was around, and you'd say you want a letter of marque. A letter of marque gives you permission to be a pirate. Now, of course, that comes with a string, and the string is that the governor has to get 10% or some percent of what you catch. Now, particularly during the American Revolution, the United States did not have, among other things, a supply of gunpowder. Does anybody know where gunpowder came from? It came from India. It's saltpeter, and they brought the gunpowder, and the United States had 2,000 ships running around the seas trying to catch British ships that were carrying, among other things, gunpowder. We won't go exactly into what is made of gunpowder, but it smells very, very bad. It's essentially sewage, and it's called saltpeter. And if you're a chemical engineer or something, you know exactly, you mix the saltpeter with sulfur and charcoal, and you have gunpowder. So in any case, you get this license to be a pirate, and if you come back and you share everything according to the agreement, everything is all right. Now, you can't catch ships that belong to a friendly nation, but in this case, catching a British ship was fair game. And American ships actually caught 10% of all of the British shipping, and that's where Washington got his gunpowder. And so you can see this was a good business. Now, a number of other mayors and people in Elizabeth went into the pirate business. We made pirate ships here in Elizabeth, and why is that a good thing for our history? The answer is that to be able to make a ship and service a ship requires an awful lot of talent. You have to be able to make rope, you have to be able to make sails, you have to be able to make iron, you have to be able to make copper fittings. Building a ship is a very complex thing, and you can't do it badly or else the ship will sink. And so, in any case, Elizabeth developed the skills and attracted the immigrants to Elizabeth that had the skills to work in the shipbuilding and manufacturing business. So maybe pirates are not a good way to start, but that's pretty much how we started. Now, this particular room, the woodwork in here is original, and have any of you ever been to Williamsburg?
Yes.
Okay, well, Williamsburg, they have a royal governor's palace there. Now, that is a total fake, not a Walt Disney fake, but it's made on the same plans as the original, but it is not an original building. It's a copy of what they think the building looked like. This is not a copy, this is the original. And this is one of the finest rooms in North America. One just like it is in one of the famous museums down in Delaware. The only difference is that head right there. Originally, the Prime Minister of England, William Pitt, his head was up there. And after the Revolution, the people who lived here decided that William Pitt had to go, and Diana, the goddess of the hunt, became the occupant of that location. But,
She's a Roman goddess.
yep. Okay, now let's move on upstairs. Okay, this room was Governor Belcher's room. And actually, in the old days, when you had official meetings with people, you went to your office. But if people were considered your friends, you had them to your bedroom. And this is the bedroom. Now, if anyone believes in ghosts or anything like that, right about 3 feet from that wall, about 4 feet from that wall, that's exactly the location where Governor Belcher died. So if that would be the location. Now, the only piece of original paint in this whole house is that right there. That's original paint from the 1750s. Everything else is a copy or a reproduction or something. But we've actually drilled into the walls, and we know each level of paint that was in this room. So if you wanted to know what color was this room in 1820, we can go through and see what level 1820 was on the room. So we might know that it was a green room, this, a yellow room, some other time. This is the Governor Belcher type room. Now, do you remember I told you about the party that the British burned everything? Okay. The Marquis de Lafayette, who was one of the very wealthiest men in the world, third wealthiest man in France, he was at the wedding and he knew the bride, and this is one of the wedding presents. This was given by the Marquis de Lafayette to Catherine Boudinot, made in France. Now, during the American Revolution, Lafayette went back to speak to the King of France and to other people to try and get support for the American Revolution. And then when he's back there, he had things made to bring back as nice gifts for friends and people. And this set is, you see, Catherine Boudinot is that's the initials carved in there. This is original from that wedding. And I did mention that Governor Belcher was a very wealthy man. This is one of the things that made him wealthy. Ah, what is in the rock?
Gold.
Well, it's a metal, but not gold.
Copper.
Very good.
It's green, you guys.
That's the green. That's the turquoise color. And this comes from the mine that was owned by Governor Belcher. Governor Belcher's family also owned 15 ships, and figuring about $5 million per ship, he was a pretty rich man. Being a royal governor was a good job. How did he get the job of being a royal governor? I don't expect anyone to answer that. When Governor Belcher was a young man, he made a trip to England. And he made a side trip, and he went to Germany, a place called Hanover. And he visited a lady named Sophia. And Sophia had the title of Electress of Hanover, and sort of Queen of Hanover, a place in Germany. But because the English kings, Queen Anne and so forth, did not produce any children, they had to find somebody to catch their kings from, or to make a king. And Parliament issued a decree that the children of the Electress of Hanover, Sophia, would become the kings of England. And so George I, II, III, and so forth, right up to the present Queen, they are related to this family that from Hanover. And from that meeting, Governor Belcher got an appointment as the governor of Massachusetts and later as New Hampshire. He did not do the job very well, so he got a booby prize, and that's New Jersey. So he got to be the governor of New Jersey later on. He was not popular in Boston, he was not popular in New Hampshire, but he was popular in Elizabeth. People of New Jersey really did like him, and he had one very strange belief, which he put forth in the rules, and that is that women would be able to own property in their own name.
Yeah.
For 1750, that is a very unusual opinion to have. So, if you remember Belcher for anything, not his name, which is sort of funny, but But if you remember for anything, that's one unique feature. Now, over here, we have a set of china. And this is a dessert service. We've got coffee cups, tea cups, and place for tea, and little dessert cups. The Pear Tree Smith family went on a trip to England, and what they did is they collected all the white china they could get, just plain white china. This piece was made about 1700 in China, but it was just white when it left China. The cups here, made in Germany. These cups are made in France. The desserts were made either in France or Germany. And it was common in those days to have your stuff, once you collected the white china, you hired somebody to paint a design on it. And so those were actually used in this house, but happily the day of that party where everything was destroyed, it was not in the house, it had already been taken to Newark. So that's probably the oldest thing in the room here. Now, when Governor Belcher lived here, his food would have been brought here to the room, and the china would have been taken from here and pulled out here. Food would be scooped in, and he'd be served at a little plate right here. And I think there's another place, remember downstairs where they had the bottles in the andiron? Well, you keep your warm drinks right in there in a bottle, and with a fire going, it would keep the contents warm. Now, Governor Belcher had a problem with gout. He did drink a bottle of Madeira a day, and he wondered why he had gout. But anyway, can anyone guess why Madeira was so popular in this country?
I don't know if they know what that is. I don't know if they know what that is.
Madeira is a wine. It was the most expensive wine. It's a Portuguese wine. But the interesting thing, because of an arrangement with Portugal, there was no tax in Britain or very, very low tax on wine that came from Portugal. So the colonists who didn't like paying British taxes preferred to buy the wine from Portugal because it had very low taxes and didn't support England. So that was like a little protest. The lady that brought tea to England was Catherine of Braganza. She was Queen of Portugal, and she's the person that introduced tea to England. So in any case, for small visitors, small parties, the governor would have been right in here. Now we're going to go across the hall, and we're going to visit Mrs. Belcher's house, or room. Now, as you come in, as you can tell, the building is used. The building doesn't sit around and gather dust. Every summer for the last 6 years, this building's been used by a summer intern to do the research and work. These two young ladies are working on a project right now.
Oh, we've got live models in here.
This is Mrs. Belcher right down there at the computer.
Hi.
Okay, this was Mrs. Belcher's bedroom. It's unique because it actually does have a bathroom and doesn't have running water, but there is the bathtub right in there, the type that she would have used. And there's a little fireplace in here as well. And anyone know what this is?
It's like her dress. Yeah, they put it in her dress.
And you have to figure
She
that
was short.
they were all very short. They were like my grandmother, like 4 feet 9. And so that they were smaller people, so these appear to be bigger rooms to them. So you can figure that's about where her waist was.
I thought I was playing.
One of the interesting things in this room are the Delft tiles that are in the back here. Some of those tiles are worth thousands of dollars. They're original from the 1600s and some from the early 1700s. They're very collectible. Now the tiles in the fireplace across the way, those are reproductions. They're like one that was here, but they are not real, they've been destroyed. These are real, and the ones that are in Belcher's, in the bathroom here, those are real. Behind that, don't open it, but that was where they kept the books. Governor Belcher had a library of 400 books, and he gave them to Princeton University. So the Princeton University library started with the 400 books that belonged to Governor Belcher. So, and that was where he had his books. Now we are going to go, for all of those who are fairly brave, we are going way down to the basement.
Yeah, I'll stay up here.
I don't think there are any ghosts down there, no. Now, you can see that the foundation of the old part of this house is over here, and then we'll go into the other rooms back there, and that's the new part of the house. But this basement is where they would have kept their food supplies and drinks. This would probably have held an awful lot of beer and ale, and the governor kept his Madeira in the room behind here. But this room has some interesting things, and here's a pile of oyster shells. Now these oyster shells are from a species of oyster that is no longer around in New York Harbor. And that's quite sad, because oysters will clean 50 gallons of water per day. So if you have 10 million oysters, you are going to have a lot of cleaner water. So that's another. Pollution, yes. But we're trying to bring oysters back. Now the most interesting thing about this is if you can look back there, you'll see a brick wall that was bricked up behind those wood that's leaning there. Does everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. Back in 1850, a Quaker doctor lived here. And has anyone ever heard of the Underground Railroad?
Yes.
Okay. This is the tunnel. That's the entrance to the tunnel that goes down to the Elizabeth River. And when slaves were attempting to get away from the United States, they would leave the South, they'd come up through Elizabeth and through other towns, and they would find a place to stay until they could get transported up the Hudson River and on to Canada. So this meets all of the requirements. The people who were here, nobody advertised they were part of the Underground Railroad. But because you could get here from an obscure entrance, you could come in here, you'd be safe for day 2 or 3 or whatever. Now the Newark Star-Ledger did do a page article on this, full page, on this particular aspect of the building. So we do know that the tunnel went to the river because people that have been digging through here have bumped into the tunnel when they were putting basements in and so forth. Tunnels originally in colonial times were used also for storing things, food, and tunnels were useful. It's not an uncommon thing, but during the period around the Civil War, this was useful for the purpose of the Underground Railroad. So that's another aspect of this building here. Now these, when we were digging around the building, this is back in 1960 or so, we picked up all of these pieces of china, and I think I mentioned to you that you should remember one of the plates that was upstairs. Do you see right there, there's a blue piece of broken china right there. Okay, that piece there is the same piece that's upstairs. Now, that is not original to the house, but that one is. And by studying that, we found that the piece upstairs, which is from Leeds, England in the mid-1700s, so this is what is the same thing as that upstairs. But this is proof that that was here, and that that's the kind of china they used. And if you go through these pieces, which we have sorted somewhat, and we have barrels more of it, but many pieces came from China, many pieces came from Germany. It's a very interesting thing to see what was used here over the 350 years that this has been a home. Now, moving back here, by the way, how many of you have noticed a bunch of cockroaches we have here?
What?
We don't have any.
Oh my God.
Why don't we have any?
Because you guys maintain this place really well?
No. It's because The plaster used in this building and the lime is made from oyster shells that have been burned and turned into lime. And it's one of those things that does not attract, in fact, it does not attract cockroaches or any insect. We put no poisons here at all. So in old buildings, you don't see the bugs that you see in modern buildings. And you could see any rat that wanted to come in here could if he wanted to, but there's no reason for him to come. And the bugs don't come in here either. So this is one feature about old buildings. Without water, there's no attraction for insects to come here. Now let's go in here. This is a master clock. Remember I told you that Ben Franklin was here? You know what Ben Franklin's business was? He was a printer. And all of the official documents for Governor Belcher and for New Jersey were printed by Benjamin Franklin. And he made a lot of money in the printing business. But one of the things that Ben Franklin is noted for is a Franklin stove. It's a very efficient stove. It happens that we have parts of one here, and we haven't gotten around to fixing it, but it's still here, and hopefully we'll get around. There were a lot of Franklin type stoves made, and I don't know if Ben Franklin actually gave it to us personally, but in any case, you'll notice the broken bottles. This is a broken Madeira bottle right here, and there were a lot of bottles around here. Many of them are former medicine bottles. And do you know what most medicine in this period was?
Ketchup.
Flat out opium. It's either laudanum, opium, or various drugs of that nature. Most of their drugs were not very useful for medicinal purposes, but they did relieve pain. So there was one medicine of the period, and I haven't found a bottle of it, very, very common. And it was a fellow named Benjamin Godfrey, and he had a drug that was given to children. And it's one of the saddest parts of history because Dr. Benjamin Godfrey probably killed more people than anybody you could think of. Because what happened is the babies, in order to stop them from crying, were given Dr. Benjamin Godfrey's tonic. And as a result, they wanted the tonic instead of food. And many children just plain starved to death. And you can look that up on the internet. You can get all the gory details. But you learn a lot about going through old buildings, about what they ate. You see the bones here. You can tell if you can identify.
Look like oxtails.
Excuse me?
Look like oxtails.
But these, by the way, you notice the nice colors. That's what happens when very old bottles are in the ground for a very long time. And these are the medicine bottles. As I said, I have not found a Benjamin Godfrey, but that would be an interesting find, a very sad piece of history. So, yes?
Is that corn real? Like,
Oh yeah, it is. Actually, the corn upstairs, we found stuff in the attic. We did find a whole set of children's toys, which we've got put away. But it's a very fine collection of wooden toys that children would have played with in the early 1800s. Yeah.
what's a Coca-Cola bottle?
That is not an antique. In various times there were workers here and we found it, so we just kept. So it shows that the house was used in all periods. So this house has always been occupied, somebody living here for the last 350 years.
Does someone live here now? Someone live here now?
No, but Tracy lives across the street. He's in that house and he makes sure that these things are kept in good shape. And any questions about colonial life or everything you ever wanted to know, right? And more. Anyway, we're very happy that people come here, and this is not generally open to the public, so, but if people have a particular interest, I'm very happy to have them come around and show them whatever they're interested in. Mostly the students, and many from NJIT,
come here with various work projects. Most of the rooms are filled with people working on environmental projects. We are not a museum, but we want to keep the place used and useful. But when people are here, we hope they think about the history of the area and connect things about history with whatever they're studying today. So we hope to see you again someday doing something.